It was one of those nights when the wind didn't just blow, it screamed. Snowflakes like shards of glass tore through the air, swirling in wild patterns across the empty road leading through the mountains. The temperature had dropped so low that even the moon seemed frozen in place. Inside a worn wooden cabin at the edge of a forgotten town, Ethan Cole, a former Marine, sat alone beside a dying fire. His hands, rough and scarred, trembled as he held a chipped mug of coffee. The fire's warmth wasn't enough to chase away the cold in his heart. Life after service hadn't gone as planned. His small construction business, once full of promise, had gone bankrupt after a deal went wrong. The bank took his trucks, the clients disappeared, and the few workers he had left moved on. The uniform that once gave him purpose was now folded in a box under his bed, just a memory of discipline and pride. And tonight, he had no company but silence and regret. Then, amid the howling storm, came the sound, distant at first, but growing louder. Engines. Dozens of them. Ethan rose and walked to the door, peering through the frosty glass. Headlights pierced the snowstorm like eyes of steel beasts. A line of motorcycles rolled through the blizzard, stopping right outside his cabin. At the front of the formation was a woman in black leather, helmet off, dark hair damp with snow, eyes sharp and unyielding. She looked like someone who had seen too many battles and refused to lose another. Behind her, 20 women bikers, all dressed in matching black gear, dismounted and stood beside their bikes like a disciplined army. The woman stepped forward, her boots crunching through the snow. When she reached his porch, she spoke, her voice steady, calm, but heavy with urgency. "Greater than, we need shelter, please." Ethan hesitated, his hand still on the doorknob. He looked past her at the army of riders behind her, all women, their faces illuminated by the glow of motorcycle headlights. Something in her tone wasn't begging, it was asking with dignity. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own past, the eyes of a leader who carried her people through storms, both literal and unseen. Inside the cabin, the women took off their jackets, shook off the snow, and gathered around the fire. Their laughter, soft at first, filled the space with warmth that Ethan hadn't felt in years. The woman who had spoken at the door introduced herself as Veronica Steele, a name that suited her perfectly. She was a CEO by day, the founder of a successful logistics company, and the leader of an all-female biker club known as the Valkyries. "Greater than, we were riding to deliver supplies to a shelter up north," she explained, her voice calm but firm. "But the storm hit harder than forecasted. We lost contact with the convoy. We just needed a place to stay until morning." Ethan nodded, still processing everything. He made coffee for everyone and listened as they talked about the open roads, the challenges of leadership, and how loyalty among them was thicker than blood. He found himself drawn to Veronica's strength. She wasn't just powerful, she was purposeful. Her eyes carried both the confidence of a leader and the compassion of someone who had fought for her people. When most of the bikers went to rest, Veronica stayed by the fire. Ethan sat across from her, watching the flames dance between them. Morning broke through the storm with a pale sun rising over endless white fields. The storm had passed, but the bikes were half buried in snow. The women worked together, laughing and teasing each other as they shoveled the snow free. Ethan joined in, and for the first time in a long while, he felt part of something greater again. When the road cleared, Veronica came to him with a simple offer. "Greater than, you've got hands that build. We've got people that need homes. We could use someone like you." At first, Ethan hesitated. He was used to rejection, to failure. But something about her tone, steady, honest, believing, made him say yes. And so, what began as an accident became a partnership that would change lives. Over the next months, Ethan worked with the Valkyries on their new project, Haven Roads, a joint initiative between Veronica's company and local veterans groups. Their goal was to rebuild abandoned shelters and homes for people who had nowhere else to go, veterans, single mothers, and victims of disaster. Ethan designed, led, and trained teams. The bikers provided logistics, funding, and security. And together, they turned empty buildings into places of hope. The media soon caught on. The story of a bankrupt Marine and a CEO biker leading a band of women to rebuild communities spread across the nation. People called them heroes, but they didn't do it for praise, they did it for purpose. At night, when the work was done, Ethan and Veronica often sat by a campfire surrounded by the women who now called him Captain. Greater than, you gave us a new mission, Veronica said one evening, handing him a mug of coffee. No, Ethan replied with a quiet smile. You gave me one. In those moments, under the stars and the hum of motorcycles, two souls, one forged by war, the other by leadership, found peace in a cause that healed them both. Years later, the world would remember that night, not as a random encounter in a snowstorm, but as the beginning of a movement. Haven Roads grew into a nationwide network, with chapters in every state. Veterans found new purpose. Women who once rode for adrenaline now rode for compassion, delivering food, rebuilding homes, mentoring the lost. But life, as always, came full circle. One winter evening, another storm swept through the same mountain range where it had all begun. Ethan and Veronica, older now but still strong, returned to that same cabin, now rebuilt and turned into a veteran's shelter. They stood on the porch, watching as new riders, young women with the Valkyrie insignia, arrived, engines rumbling through the snow. The leader of the new generation saluted them proudly. Greater than, we're here to deliver supplies, sir. Just needed shelter for the night. Ethan laughed softly. Greater than, you're always welcome here. Later that night, by the fire, Veronica looked at him and smiled. Greater than, you ever think about that first night? She asked. Every day, he said. If you hadn't knocked on that door, you would have still been lost, she finished for him. Maybe, but because of you, I found my way home. The fire crackled between them, glowing on faces that had weathered storms, loss, and redemption. They didn't need words anymore, the silence said everything. When morning came, the snow had stopped. The new riders departed, their engines echoing through the valley. Ethan and Veronica watched them go, side by side, knowing the world they built would keep riding long after they were gone. And above the door of the cabin, engraved in wood, were the words that started it all.